Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. If you've joined me for the first time, this is a great start. Welcome. My name is Cindi. I'm at Simply Cindi here on YouTube. I've kind of ventured out on my channel and started doing book series where I'm reading, and it's turning out pretty well. So, for those of you that are new, because this is your type of content, thank you and welcome. I'm trying to get better at reading the book in characters and making comments. So if it's something that you just want to hear the book, this is probably not it. Because there'll be do-overs and I won't do them over. I'm not going to edit any of that out. So if I mess up or I read the wrong thing and then have to repeat it correctly, and this is more of you kind of sitting back, relaxing into the fall and winter and then spring and maybe summer months. I don't know how this is going to go, but this is more about us being together, enjoying a book as it unfolds. If you have any books that you have heard about or know, this is more of the fantasy into our type of, because my channel is I'm a medium. Um, so it's kind of into that paranormal, witchy, vampire kind of, I'm kind of open to all of it. But I'm also doing another book series where we're learning and have wisdom. So, like inner workbooks and how to's and all of that stuff. So, if you're interested in that, then I'm going to be doing starting a book series alongside this one. So, this is more about gathering, enjoying yourself, having your cup of herbal tea, your coffee, your wine if you want, your other kind of things that help you calm down if you want, and just enjoy. That's all this is. It's just about enjoyment. There's so many things going on in this world, and I'm trying to help in my own way to keep people in a um I don't want to say good vibration, but in a vibration that you're sort of meant to have. Like not this one against the other, bad against good. I just want everybody to calm down because our thoughts become things, and that's how we create our world. At least that's my understanding through all my studies and then my belief system. And so let's think of good spaces and let's be in good spaces and let's show the world that we still have love and we can open our hearts and we can keep our hearts open, right? Anyway, that's my part in helping. I mean, I do other things, but that's kind of put on the back burner. If anybody, if you've seen me before and you want a reading or you need to see me because of a loved one or whatever, I can help with that. But this is not what this is about. This is just about us gathering and enjoying. So, all that being said, we have a brand new book. The last book in the Company of Witches was so awesome. It was light. It wasn't anything heavy. We had a little bit of heaviness here and there, but it wasn't like it was a good mystery. We came to love the characters, and I absolutely loved the ending. I am going to read the second book to that after we read this one. And this one is a series as well. So it's called Spellbound After Midnight, and it is by Jenna Collett, I think is her name. And so I do want to give, what's the word? I do want to give accolades to the authors. I am doing this not to take over their like audiobooks or whatever. This is just us gathering. And so I'm going to be putting my input. Sometimes you'll hear me go, "Oh no," or "Oh no, she didn't." Like you're going to hear me do that stuff. Um, and please join in because I loved when you guys were commenting, "No way," or "What's next?" or I love that. That kind of gives me feedback as to if I'm doing things the way that you, not always the way that you want, but like headed in that direction, or it just helps to get feedback. And trust me, you're not going to hurt my feelings. So just say what you want to say. Um, so anyway, it's called Spellbound After Midnight. This one is going to have some romance. The last one did not, but this one is going to have some romance. And we'll kind of see where we go from there. So I'm not sure how much romance or what kind of romance, and it kind of a little bit kind of concerns me because this is YouTube. So if I have to say, oh, we got to stop there, or I got to like put it in code or something, we'll kind of work that out. But just bear with me. This isn't something that you're going to be like, oh, I wanted to hear that part and, she had to stop. That's what this is. I'm going to be stopping sometimes. I'm going to be commenting sometimes. There's going to be mess up sometimes because I want it all to be authentic. And speaking of authenticity, if you followed me and know me, I know this is a long intro and I'm sorry, but if that just brings me to this other subject. If you followed me and know me, I'd said to you guys, it is time to be your authentic self. Authenticity is what Spirit has had me tell everyone right now. Authenticity. Be authentic. Your authenticity, not what you think other people's authenticity is. And I just found where they did a study that shows authenticity resonates even higher than love, which I'm going to do a video about. I know it's very interesting, but that's crazy that I just kind of found that, and that Spirit's kind of been leading me that way. Anyway, back to this. Let's enjoy ourselves. Let's be authentic. Get in your pajamas, get in your big clothes, get in your blankie, and we're going to start soon, okay? And after we do so many chapters, I will put them all together like I did the last one, and then you guys can kind of binge it to lead up to the ending, okay? So again, welcome you new ones. Thank you, you OGs, for coming again. And let's start chapter one. Love you, love you, love you. The Kingdom of Ever. Daniel's Curses and Cures. Magic had really screwed me this time. I stared at the herbs in the bottom of the mortar and pretended not to notice the lime green hair escaping Miss Anderson's hood. She withdrew a glass of vial from her pocket and slammed it on the counter. I eyed the half-used potion. It was my latest creation, guaranteed to give my customers' hair a shiny new luster. Unfortunately, guaranteed might be too strong of a word. I probably should have tested the concoction on my own auburn locks before stocking the shelves. I want my money back. Now, Mrs. Anderson, you know I can't do that. I tapped the wooden sign popped up on the propped up on the edge of the counter. No refunds. Mrs. Anderson's eyes twitched, the little spasm a precursor to the boiling wrath beneath the surface. Look what you've done. She whipped off her hood to expose a mass of green curls. The color was awful, but it was the acidic smell that made tears sting the corner of my eyes. Pressing my knuckles under my nose, I took shallow breaths. Uh, did you follow the directions? The wooden sign hit the floor, followed by a basket of tea leaves. When she reached for the crystal jar filled with moonstones, I held up my hand in defeat. Okay, you can have a refund. I searched under the counter and counted out the coins, which amounted to the entire day's profit. Mrs. Anderson wasn't my only dissatisfied customer. Earlier, I'd cast a siren spell and left a young woman mute. A cup of honey ginger brew had solved the problem, but I didn't expect a glowing recommendation. You're a disgrace, Tessa. Your mother would turn in her grave if she could see what you've done to her magic shop. She snatched the coins from my finger. And you call this yourself a witch? Her words stung, but she wasn't wrong. My spell came in fits and spurts. Sorry, my spells came in fits and spurts, and my potions never turned out right. Admittedly, this was the first time I'd ever dyed a woman's hair green. I'm sure it's not permanent. Why don't you try this potion to counteract the effects? I nudged a different vial across the counter. On the house. Mrs. Anderson smiled, her lips straining at the corners. Holding my gaze, she lifted the tub and removed the cork stopper to spill its contents onto the carpet. Ooh, how rude. The rug immediately turned bright pink. I bit my lip. Too much mugwort? I was sure I'd measured that one correctly. If your mother and I hadn't been such good friends, you'd be hearing from my solicitor. Mrs. Anderson flipped the hood over her head and charged towards the door. I am so sorry. I didn't know how. The bell above the door jingled with the exit, putting an end to my apology. I groaned and dropped my forehead into my hands. What was I supposed to do now? Peeking between my fingers in the carpet, I watched the pink stain vanish, leaving behind a spot leaving behind a spot in better condition than before. The potion did work. It just needed a minute. You know, yeah. Everyone is so impatient, I muttered, grabbing the used vials and dropping them in a basket beneath the counter. Quiet filled the empty shop except for the rhythmic tick of the pendulum. I was running out of time, and the grandfather clock in the corner was gleefully counting down the seconds. Stacks of bills littered the countertop, the invoices mocking me with their vast sums and creeping deadlines. I sifted through them and paused at the notice that outweighed them all. Argus. I never should have borrowed money from his gang. It didn't matter that I'd been desperate and on the verge of selling the magic shop. I'd missed a payment, and Argus didn't do miss payments. 3 days ago, excuse me, 3 days ago, I'd arrived home to find one of my lanterns on the gate post shattered. A note had been nailed to the wood containing a single word stamped in red. Overdue. Ooh. Warning number one. Then yesterday, Argus had sent one of his thugs to lurk outside my shop. The heavy belt at the thug's waist, showing knives and other ominous tools, hadn't escaped my notice. When he caught me looking, he pulled a blade from his sheath and inspected the end. Yeah, it was sharp. Warning number two. Something told me I would not like warning number three. I closed my eyes and I tried to cast the blame where it really belonged. This wouldn't have happened if my magic had developed properly. In my family's long line of witches, I was the only one who hadn't mastered the calling. My mother had always believed I was special and would become the most powerful witch in our line. Only, in the years since her death, I'd bought the magic shop I'd brought the magic shop to the brink of closure and sent most of my mother's dedicated clients running in the opposite direction. A lump formed in my throat as I thought of her. I was number one, all right. A number one screw up, if anything. I'd mastered the art of warding people away. Too bad I couldn't bottle that up and sell it. Proper warding spells sold for a fortune. With a heavy sigh, I dismissed the bills and circled the counter. My joints ached from too many hours on my feet, and I stifled a yawn as I padded across the floor. At the window, I pushed aside a tasseled curtain and squinted to see out into the dark yard. A young woman stood in the walkway leading up to the shop, illuminated by the glow of my one remaining lantern. Her long blonde hair cascaded down her shoulder, and she twisted a strand around her finger. She bounced on her heels as if trying to decide whether she was coming or going. With a curt nod, she decided she was coming. The woman bounded up the steps and pushed open the door before I pulled myself away from the window. I studied her, trying to remember if I'd sold her any botched potion. At least her hair wasn't green. But if she wanted a refund like the others, she'd be out of luck. Maybe I could offer her a store credit. No, better to cut her off before she asked. We're closed. She hovered in the doorway, letting the cold air in. Are you a witch? My teeth clenched at the obvious question. Witch, fairy godmother, take your pick. We're still closed. I need your help. I realize it's late, but you're the only shop open. Except, as I mentioned, I'm not. Crossing both arms over my chest, I hoped she'd take the hint and leave. The woman ignored my remark and sank to her knees. She rummaged through a bag slung over her shoulder. I can pay you. Apparently, she knew a few magical words of her own. I'm listening. The front of the woman's cloak gaped open, revealing a filthy smock covered in ash. It spotted her skin, too, leaving a gray smudge along her temple. She was most likely a maid, some unfortunate girl saddled with a miserable employer. She wasn't rich. In fact, she looked dirty poor. Or, sorry, dirt poor. Emphasis on dirt. What's your name? I asked, warming to the idea of turning a profit. Ella Lockwood. Pausing in her search, she stuck out a hand. Tessa Daniels. I felt the rough calluses covering her pain as we shook. Workers' hands, the kind used scrubbing floors and washing laundry. Ella pulled away and resumed her search. Here it is. She withered a small object and held it up to the light. The ring was my mother's. The simple gold ring with an ornate design carved into its surface wouldn't sell for much at the pawn shop, but it might bring in enough to cover my missed payments. I considered the trade, even as guilt warned with self-perseverance, and the little voice masquerading as my conscience urged me to think twice. The ring was a family heirloom, and I'd sold enough of my mother's belongings to know the toll that took. I'd received temporary funds in exchange for a permanent void. Each time, each item was a piece of her slipping away. I can't take it. Sorry. I brushed Ella's hand aside and walked over to the door, cursing my morals with each step. God, I know how that feels. Refusing money to save someone else's future heartbreak defied logic. I'm sure a lot of you know what that's like, as I'm sitting here thinking and reading. Argus would have no trouble breaking something of mine, though I was sure he wasn't about to break my heart. My knees, most likely. Wait, I know it's not much, but I'm desperate. I'll do anything. Anything? The word made me pause. I'd be willing to do anything to save the shop. And look where that had gotten me. This kind of desperation rarely worked out in the victim's favor. Still, I'd do it again. And it wasn't like I wasn't taking advantage of her. I needed money, and she needed a spell. I might not be the best witch, or much of a witch at all, but I had a duty, a family creed. My mother would have helped, no questions asked. She'd have done it for free. I wasn't that foolish. If I accept, what do you want? A glimmer of hope flashed across Ella's eager face. The king is throwing a ball for his son tonight, and I have to be there. My gaze took a second journey over Ella's rumpled uniform and soot-covered shoes. She wasn't exactly ball material, not by a long shot. I should have guessed, though. The Prince's ball had been the talk of the kingdom since the invitations went out. Prince Marcus of Ever was searching for a wife, and every eligible woman in the kingdom was invited, myself included. The idea of trying to snare a prince to solve my money problems had lasted all of 3 seconds. Yeah, I get that too. Oh, I'm already kind of liking her. Well, my looks had no trouble attracting a man. While my looks had no trouble attracting a man, my spells and my reputation usually put them off before I could secure a proposal. You turn a suitor into a mouse one time, and suddenly everyone's hesitating to kiss you. I'm sorry. Oh, I could tell stories. Anyway, honestly, it was an accident, and I changed it back the second I figured out how. You need a gown, don't you? Shoes too, and a carriage. Is that all? I laughed. Potions and creams I had, but Ella needed an illusion spell, the least stable type of magic. If I cast it wrong, the illusion might fade and Ella would wind up in rags on the dance floor, or worse, naked. I cringed. There weren't enough smelling salt in the kingdom to manage that scene. And if I found out she'd been and if they'd found out she'd been to see me, goodbye magic shop. Ella grasped my arm, and her voice took on a pleading note. Will you help? I have nowhere else to go. Fine, I mumbled, regretting the words as soon as they left my mouth. Then again, who was I to dash a young girl's dream of marrying a prince? Joy blossomed onto Ella's face, and her cheeks flushed with a pretty shade of pink. In the right light, and minus all the dirt, Ella was quite attractive. Who knew? Maybe the spell would work, and she'd land herself a prince. In thanks, they'd shower me with gold, and it would solve all my problems. That kind of optimism was usually reserved for suckers. I'm sorry, I like her. But at my rate, things needed to turn around. Ella's eyes sparkled with excitement. How do we start? I've never seen magic in action before. The last time I performed an illusion, things had gotten dicey. I'd considered the fragile jars of potion lining the shelves. We were surrounded by way too much glass to cast a spell indoors. I couldn't afford to trash the shop if something went wrong. The ring was supposed to pay for my debt, not damages. Let's go into the backyard. Magic works best in the open air. Ella nodded. Makes sense. Magic seems so volatile. She had no idea. I opened the back door and ushered her outside. Stand over there, I instructed, waving her away from the house. Ella lifted her skirt and waded through the overgrown grass. She stepped into the beam of moonlight, and it washed her features of color, making her appear more ghost than human. Here? Perfect. Don't move. I can't stress that enough. I rubbed my hands together and let magic build between my palms. Sparks sizzled in the air near my fingertips, and unease rippled through me. I pushed it aside. It wasn't like I could make Ella's clothes any worse than they already were. I began to chant. Wait! Ella held up a finger and took a step forward, halting me mid-spell. I'm sure whatever you have in mind will be beautiful, but I've always dreamed of wearing a gown made of chiffon and silver beading, if it's not too much trouble. How about a matching pair of glass slippers while I'm at it? I deadpanned. Can you? Ella lifted her hand to her lips in wonder. I blew a I blew out a breath, my sarcasm wasted. Just go back to where you were and don't move. Rubbing my hands, I recaptured the flow of magic. I made sure Ella followed my directions and then let my eyes drift shut. The wind bracketed my face, swirling around my shoulders and neck. I curled my fingers into fist and flung my arms out, sending a warm gust of air across the yard. Sparks glittered as Ella spun in a slow circle. Soft layers of chiffon billowed from her waist, and rows of silver beads encrusted the body of the gown. They glistened and twinkled like the stars overhead. A pair of translucent slippers adorned her feet. Ella raised her ankle, taking it all in. It's the most beautiful gown I've ever seen. Satisfaction expanded inside my chest, and I crooked my finger, signaling to her to join my side. And now the carriage. I pointed to the overgrown pumpkin nestled in the garden. Fists together, I shot them out, launching another draft of warm air. I wafted over to the target, and the pumpkin grew larger and larger until it cast a shadow over the yard. I nudged Ella. I nudged Ella, and gave her a smug smile. The pumpkin exploded. Chunks of pulp hurtled through the air, landing in wet clumps at the feet. Seeds splattered across the fence like organic shrapnel, and I moaned as stringy goo oozed down the side of the garden shed. The urge to gag pushed at the back of my throat when the odor of soggy gourd filled my nostril. I regained my composure and my gag reflex. I counted the remaining pumpkins, and I gave a sheepish shrug. Want me to try again? A beat of silence passed as Ella picked seeds from her gown. Now that I think of it, there's a carriage post near here. I'll hire one. If you think that's best, I swallowed my pride. It was clear I'd reached my magical limit for the day. Ella gestured to her gown. How long will the spell last? There was no way to know for sure, but I plastered on a confident smile. Hours. So go ahead and dance till midnight. I'm not going there to dance. Ella's sharp tone made me frown. I forced the concern away. It wasn't my business if she planned on dancing or pickpocketing guests. I'd done my part. Well, two-thirds. Thank you for this. I should go, or I'll be late. Ella pressed the ring into my hand as payment. Our fingers touched, and a shock erupted as at its contact. Sorry. Oh, I needed something to drink. Sorry. A fiery pain spread through my palm. Unfurling my fingers to gaze at the ring, I watched it glow bright orange, then cool to its original color. The intense heat had branded my palm, and the same engraving etched into the ring. Be careful, Ella. I wasn't sure why I'd said that. The woman was going to a ball, not the grave. But knowing that didn't ease my concern. Ella smiled softly, the gesture not reaching her eyes. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but changed her mind. Instead, she straightened her spine, gave a final nod of thanks, and disappeared through the gate. I examined the symbols of my palm. It was common for spells to leave marks. The brand would fade along with the illusion. But as I stood in the frigid night air, a chill that had nothing to do with the cold swept through my body. It intensified, making each breath a sharp pain in my lungs. A bad omen. As a witch, I had a few. I'd had a few, and when one occurred, you didn't push it aside. I moved towards the gate on wobbly legs, fear urging me to find Ella and bring her back. When I reached the road, however, she was already gone. Chapter 2. The wisp of fog covered the ground. as I bent and shoveled pumpkin chunks into the bucket at my feet. A headache beat at my temples, and I paused to press the ache away with my fingers. Images from the night before flashed through my mind. I'd handled the green hair incident and the annoyance of Ella's arrival, but everything after that was a blur. The ring, the promise to help, the spell. I groaned and glanced the graveyard. I groaned and glanced at the ravaged pumpkin, evidence of my abysmal magic. I should be glad the pumpkin exploded in my backyard and not near the palace steps. One witness was better than hundreds, not to mention the slippery mess would have incurred fines, lots of fines, ending most likely like debtor's prison. Breathing deeply, I sank the shovel into the ground and leaned against the handle. A wave of dizziness caused my remaining chunk lying in the grass to tilt and spin. I messaged the symbol, I massaged the symbols on my palm and let the feeling pass. The mark should have faded already, but the imprint remained on my skin. It worried me. Illusions last minutes or hours at most. Like everything else, it came to magic. This was further proof I wasn't normal. Yoo-hoo! I tensed at the warbled call. My neighbor, Sylvia Trager, stood near the gate, resting her weight on her cane. Maybe if I stayed still, her aging eyesight might fool her into thinking I was a garden statue or a scarecrow. An exhausted, not up for visitors sort of scarecrow. It didn't work. Sylvia motioned towards the pumpkin debacle and wrinkled her nose, setting off a chain of reaction of flutters around her lips that looked suspiciously like she was trying not to laugh. Rough night, dear? Did you drink your potions again? My shoulders slumped. Why hadn't I locked the gate? This amount of humiliation required seclusion. No, Sylvia, I didn't drink my potions. Ah, must be booze then. She chuckled her tongue and she clucked her tongue. Sorry. She clucked her tongue and shook her wrinkled chin. You're too young to be addicted to the devil's brew. Oh, I like that, the devil's brew. Though, given your difficulties, I'm not surprised. Sylvia was a fine one to talk. She frequently slipped the devil's brew into her tea when she thought no one was looking. I bit the inside of my cheek, keeping a sarcastic remark at bay. Did you need something? The old woman's eyes lit up with a spark of unshared gossip, which was never a good sign. I heard the most horrific news at the market this morning. You must join me for breakfast. She stabbed her cane into the dirt and trudged back towards her house. That was my cue to follow. Since I'd been on my own, Sylvia had taken it upon herself to make sure I stayed well fed. But her food came with a non-negotiable price. Gossip. Endless, soul-sucking gossip. Still, the promise of a free meal remained in charge of my feet, even if the prospect of infinite chatter caused my mind to rebel. I followed her into the house and entered the living room, where a fire crackled the hearth, and ruffled the powder blue curtains let in swath of muted light. The cream-colored walls hosted long shelves lined with porcelain figurines. They stared at me from their paralyzed positions with fixed smiles that seemed to say, "Get me out of here." The room might appear to be a cozy haven, but looks were deceiving. I made sure to check the thick-woven carpet for signs of Sylvia's cat, Bottoms. I'm sorry, the name is Bottoms. Before taking a hesitant step towards the sofa, the sly animal with the ridiculous name lived to bite my ankle and take swipes at me from under the chairs. It was completely unfair. I loved cats, but they didn't love me. Somewhere, my ancestors were crackling at my inability to befriend the one animal that was supposed to be my familiar. Here you are. Here you are, Sylvia trundled into the room carrying a tray loaded with muffins and a pot of tea. The heavenly scent of baked goods made my stomach growl. Sitting on the sofa, I selected a muffin while Sylvia took her usual seat by the window. I was wasting, sorry, I was tasting my first bite, savoring the tart flavor of the fresh blueberries, when a razor tipped claw sank into my calf. Stifling a yelp, I jerked my leg. The cat hissed and ducked under the sofa. Sylvia, your cat. Isn't she the sweetest thing? Light of my life. Sylvia busied herself with the pot of tea. The monster's claw found their target again, and the pain stabbed through my leg. Magic built in my palms, and before I could stop it, sparks shot from my fingertips, striking the carpet near Fuzzlebottom's furry tail. Uh-oh. The cat screeched and bolted unharmed, but the magic left a burn in the rug. Oh no. I moved my foot over the still smoking hole. Sylvia missed her cup and spilled it into the saucer. Good heavens, child. What has gotten into that cat? I stuffed both hands into the folds of my skirt, cutting off any residual magic. You said you had news. Oh, yes. Sylvia took a dainty sip and settled deeper into the chair. Her hands shook as she lowered the cup into the saucer. When I was at the market earlier, everyone was talking about the prince's ball. How fascinating. I chewed another mouthful of muffin and prepared for a lengthy list of who wore what and who danced with who. Torture, all in the same all in the name of baked goods. Sylvia dotted her lips with a napkin. It is fascinating. What with the party ending in a murder. Wait, what? I coughed, inhaled a blueberry. Who? Lady Lockwood's stepdaughter, Ella. Ella Lockwood? The muffin turned into dust in my mouth. I struggled to swallow. Ella couldn't be dead. There had to be a mistake. Are you sure? Positive. They found her submerged in the palace fountain, down, drowned. She pursed her lips and placed a wrinkled hand over her heart. According to my source, or sources, the killer staged her body. She had a rose tucked between her finger. Can you believe it? I shifted uncomfortably in my seat. Do they know who killed her? Sylvia leaned back and lifted her teacup to her lips. She took her time, enjoying the fact that she had a captive audience. My fingers itched to snatch the cup out of her hand and hurry her along. Unfortunately, no. The family is shattered. Her stepfather and stepsister are demanding answers. The poor thing. They lost Sir Lockwood last year after a dreadful illness. And now this. Guilt made the muffin I'd ingested churn in my gut. I thought of the ring Ella had given me as payment. What should I do with it now? Return it to her family or sell it as quickly as possible? Return it, I whispered in my conscience. Sell it, whispered the witch inside me, drowning in debt. And then a soft current of air trickled my ear. Help me, the voice pleaded. Gooseflesh prickled Gooseflesh prickled my arms. Did you hear that? Hear what, dear? Sylvia didn't seem fazed at all. I searched the room, positive the voice was real and alarmingly close. My palm itched around the tender skin where the ring had left its mark. Had the symbols grown darker? Closing my fist, I pushed the unsettling thought away. Sylvia continued. Apparently, Ella caused quite a stir. She danced with the prince shortly before midnight. She may have even caught his eye. The royal family is beside themselves after what's happened. All talk of the prince's hunt for a wife is on hold, and the king assigned a detective from the royal agency to handle the case. Let's see. I believe his name is Detective Chambers. They're questioning everyone Ella came in contact with. Rumors are the detective is especially interested in someone she visited before the ball. Me. Ooh. A slow breath escaped my lips. The detective was interested in me. Do the authorities know who she visited? I'm sure they do. Ah, to be young again. I hear the detective is incredibly handsome and moving up the ranks quickly for his age. Now there's a prospect. Sylvia jabbed her bony finger in my direction. You should do well with someone like him. A stable man, respected in the community. I said nothing when you refused to attend the ball, but your magic, it's... She ripped her tea. It's just terrible. Tell me how you really feel, I muttered. What's what's that, dear? I spoke louder. I don't need a husband. I need a miracle, Sylvia finished. A miracle for once, we agreed. But a miracle wouldn't appear in the form of a detective on a white horse. The man was more likely to arrest me as an accomplice to murder than to make me his wife. No, I had gotten myself into this mess, and I would get myself out of it. Another wave of guilt speared my insides. I should have sent Ella away. I should have sent Ella away. Maybe if I had, she wouldn't have made it to the ball, and she'd still be alive. There had been something off about our encounter. I'd sensed it and ignored my instincts until it was too late. Now, Ella was dead, and a detective, handsome or not, would soon be sniffing around my shop. I have to go. But you haven't finished your breakfast, Sylvia sputtered. I still have to tell you about the costumes and the buffet. Another time, Sylvia. I mentioned the mention of food made my stomach revolt. Ignoring her protest, I scrambled for the door and near ran back to the shop, my mind racing through the inventory on display and the stock I had hidden. A tight feeling constricted my chest. The law and witches rarely mixed. It didn't help that this particular witch owed a debt to one of the kingdom's most notorious crime syndicates. Borrowing money wasn't illegal, but shady dealings with the leader of a gang, it didn't look good even without meeting before a murder. And a basement full of dodgy potions. If anyone found out about those, I'd have some explaining to do. Back at the magic shop, I took the porch steps two at a time and fumbled inside my apron for the key. My fingers ran along the seam. Excuse me, and I groaned as my pinky slipped through the in the fabric. The key was missing, lost somewhere between the door and Sylvia's house. I cursed and peered through the front door, then dropped my head against the glass. A laugh bubbled in my throat as I tried to think of another way inside. An unlocking spell would be the trick. Thankfully, the road leading into town was still empty, not a detective in sight. Whispering the incantation, I lifted my palms toward the lock. A current of magic crackled in the air. It felt controlled, accurate. Oh, what a relief. Thok! The door deadbolt slammed into place. Damn it! My shoes beat a rhythm against the porch while I considered my own dwindling options. A locksmith would take too long, which left me with only one terracotta flower pot at my feet. Well, when a door is double locked, open a window. I hefted the pot into, into the air and swung it over my shoulder. Is there a problem? The planter slipped from my fingers and smashed against the wooden beam, sending my dirt and clay fragments flying. The glass, much to my dismay, remained unbroken. I pivoted towards the end of the porch, where a man lounged against the railing. His boot-clad feet were crossed at the ankles, and his arms were folded over his broad chest, encased in the charcoal gray, well-tailored coat. Amusement sparked in his gaze as I stared, unable to move. With dirt covering my shoes, he pushed away from the rail and walked closer. No, make that stalked. The hint of a smile softened the motion, but he still moved with authority. His eyes commanded attention, blue like the deep end of a pond, where it's easy to lose your footing and drown. Oh my. He had short copper brown hair, and a shadow of coarse stubble covered his chiseled jawline. It gave off a formidable impression, and I found myself mesmerized by the hard planes of his face, strong nose, and firm mouth. He stopped in front of me. Anticipation hummed through his body as I tilted my head back and held his gaze. Up close, his irises appeared darker, and I sensed the intelligence lurking in their depths. I suddenly had the feeling that anyone drowning in them had probably had their feet kicked out from under them first. Did you have did you have to startle me like that? Why were you hiding in the corner? I wasn't hiding. I'm waiting for the owner. Are you the witch? I hated that question. It only led to trouble. No, I'm not. His brows arched in surprise, and he gestured towards the door. If you're not the witch, then you must be a thief. You were about to break into the shop. I could have you arrested. My cheeks warmed in embarrassment. It figured I'd have an officer waiting on my porch. Pulling myself together, I lifted my shoulders in an easy shrug and flashed him a smile. You caught me. I held out my hand. I'm Tessa Daniels, the witch. He closed his fingers over mine. Detective Derrick Chambers. It's what I do. Catch witches? I choked. If they need catching, or if something is hiding, or have something to hide. He angled his head and pinned me with an inquiring look. How about it, Miss Daniels? Do you have something to hide? Uh-oh. I already don't know if I like him. um, okay, chapter 3. His question caught me off guard. Heat transferred between our palms along with the jolt of awareness I saw reflected in his eyes. So, maybe I wasn't the only one who felt off balance. Keeping my features calm, I stepped back and felt the smallest tug, as if he was reluctant to relinquish my hand. He must have realized his mistake because he let go, flexing his finger before stuffing them into his coat pocket. It was the only crack in his armor. It was the only crack in his armor since he'd emerged from the shadows. Something to hide? Something to hide, I laughed to cover my nerves. Not unless you count the shame of a witch locking herself out of her shop. I see. Derrick removed his hand from his pocket and revealed a small brass key. I found it on the walkway. You must have dropped it. I frowned. The man had watched me make a fool of myself trying to unlock the shop and hadn't said a word. See? I told you I'm not sure if I like him yet. I plucked the key from his palm and mouthed the curse that sat ready on my tongue. Inserting the key into the lock, I twisted the handle, but the door didn't budge. Cringing, I remembered the deadbolt. It was still engaged from my stupid spell. I ground my teeth together and murmured the incantation. The bolt slid back, and I opened the door with a flourish. After you, detective. He entered the shop, and his gaze roamed over the shelves and display racks loaded with jars and stoppered bottles. Bundles of herbs hung from the rafters, giving off a pungent, earthy smell. Derrick ducked, narrowly avoiding a cluster of sage, and wandered towards a cabinet full of books, running a finger through the grime and dust on their spine as he bent to read each title. I couldn't tell if his lips flattened from the strange subjects or the dust he rubbed between his fingers, but his slow, silent pursuit of my shop made me grind my teeth. He crossed to my workbench next and picked up a jar of orange paste, scrunching his nose in disgust when he sniffed its contents. Out came a small leather journal, and he scowled for a notion. Those are on sale? Those are on sale. I pointed to the jar he'd moved out of smelling distance. That doesn't surprise me. He inspected a spring of herbs resting on the counter with the tip of his pen. Do you know why I'm here? The kingdom introduced a new program whereby police drop in for friendly house calls. No, he gave me a dark look. I'm here on official business. There's been a murder at the palace. A murder? I feigned ignorance and tucked my nervous fingers behind my back. That doesn't explain why you're in my shop. A moment of silence passed before he pulled the chair from the from the work table and scraped it across the floor. Have a seat. I must have looked like a woman walking towards the gallows as I closed the distance and lowered myself into the chair. The wooden spokes pressed into my back, but I refused to slouch, needing every ounce of confidence I could get. He towered over me, so close I could smell the faint, woodsy scent of his cologne. I shifted, taking the spice in deeper. It was similar to something I sold, but whatever he'd purchased was better. Damn him. Derrick placed an elbow on the workbench and leaned in. The move seemed casual, but the rigid way he held himself made me think otherwise. His voice was smooth, and even when he spoke, a rich timbre that set off a flutter in my stomach. Oh, girl, don't fall for it yet. Last night, at the Prince's Ball, a young woman named Ella Lockwood was murdered. A witness claims she visited you earlier in the evening. Why? Oh, no. The symbols on my palm had grown warm again, so I massaged the spot with my thumb. I didn't know anything about Ella's murder. Maybe it would be best if I distanced myself from the situation before I got involved in any deeper. It wasn't as if I could point out her killer or give the detective any worthwhile clues. I tilted my chin and lied. I had so many customers yesterday. I'm not sure I remember anyone specific. Derrick leaned closer. The cuff of his sleeve brushed against my shoulder blade. I see. It must be difficult to keep track of the steady stream of people coming into your shop. He lifted his gaze and stared potentially at my empty doorway. A full, torturous minute passed while he watched all the non-existent customers. I squirmed in my seat, pleading for the bell suspended above the door to jingle. I stayed silent. Traitorous instruments. The mornings are slow. It picks up. My optimism sounded hollow. I would have given anything for someone to enter the shop, even a green-haired Miss Anderson. You know what I think? His tone dropped, breath warming my ear. I held still and barely contained a shiver. What, detective? I think you remember meeting Ella. He straightened and reached across the counter, sliding a worn ledger over the surface, flipping the booklet open to the marked page. He read the items. I knew what he'd find there, and I burned from humiliation. Caught in my lie. He trapped the paper with his index finger. Your sales records from yesterday has two entries, one in the morning and one in the afternoon. That's not a lot to remember. He paused, letting his words sink in. If you'd rather have this conversation in my office while I have my men conduct a thorough search of your shop, it's up to you. Who knows what they'll uncover? A witch must have secrets. A direct hit. I had plenty of secrets, not to mention an underground crawl space containing what some might consider a morally gray area of potions. My gaze darted to the hatch on the floor. Derrick caught me in the act and smirked. He took a step towards the hatch and then another. Each thud with his boots sounded like a cell door slamming closed. Witches really weren't suited for prison. All right, fine. I grabbed his sleeve, on the metal, pulling on the material until he stopped heading for the crawl space. Ella was here. It was late, and I tried to turn her away, but she was insistent I help her. I'm listening. Slumping into my chair, I continued. She offered to trade a family heirloom for a dress and a pair of shoes. I cast an illusion spell. It was innocent and legal. I might add, transaction. Derrick studied my face as if the action alone could unearth the smallest lie. Maybe it could. I felt thoroughly exposed beneath his stare. So, you used your magic and sent her off to the ball. I inclined my hand, imitating his sarcastic demeanor from before. I'm a witch, detective. It's what I do. The corner of his mouth hitched, and a tiny thrill shot through my veins. 1 point to the witch. He hadn't expected me to throw his words back in his face. My victory deemed when he made another notation in his book. This one longer. I struggled to contain my curiosity. What was he writing about me? Probably nothing good. He snapped the journal closed, making it impossible to find out and eyed me warily. Mind explaining why you were in your shop last night and not at the ball? The royal family invited every eligible woman in the kingdom. You're the right age, unmarried. It begs the question. Not every eligible woman is interested in marrying a prince, especially not when it's based on a simple encounter in the presence of hundreds of competitors. There are better ways to find a wife, detective. Is that so? His gaze traveled over the shabby carpet, a broken shelf I hadn't gotten around to fixing, and lastly, over my wrinkled gown. I resisted the urge to smooth the fabric. My clothes might not be the latest fashion or iron, but that didn't make me a leech looking to climb onto the top of the social ladder. That's right. Oh, not even if I could improve your circumstances, he asked. Sorry, not even if it could improve your circumstances, he asked. His insinuation made my back straighten, and a swell of anger hid the prick of hurt from his demeaning remark. My circumstances are fine, detective. They were far from it. But I'd drink my worst potion before I'd reveal the nugget of truth. Hearing my hearing my indignant tone, Derrick retrieved his notebook. If he'd made another notation, I swore. Did you two discuss anything personal? How would you describe her state of mind? Thrown by his change of topic, I stumbled over my answer. Was he purposely trying to confuse me? I gathered my thoughts, thinking back to Ella's demeanor. Well, she was desperate after I refused to help her. That's why I reconsidered. She seemed happy when I cast a spell, but it only lasted a moment. It felt like she wanted to tell me something but changed her mind. I'd say she was upset when she left, almost resigned. I had a bad feeling. A bad feeling? Yes, an omen. As a witch, there are times I feel negative energy on a physical level. There are crystals that amplify emotions. I planned on using one to pinpoint. He sighed and pushed away from the counter. Irritation rolled off him in waves. His thumb and forefinger rubbed the bridge of his nose as if a headache beat behind his eyes. That's all for now. If you remember anything else, you can contact me at my agency. His dismissal stung. Stung. I'd gone from character witness to crackpot in seconds. You think I'm mad, don't you? All of this. I waved my hand around the shop. The spells, the supernatural. You don't believe it's worth your time. Derrick's mouth flattened into a grim line. I believe in facts, evidence. Potions and spells don't catch killers. You dabble in illusion and feed on people's weakness. I pushed out of the chair, my face hot. That's not fair. His eyes darkened in challenge. Is that so? He strode across the wooden beams, his boots echoing with each step until he came to a stop at the hatch in the floor. The air crackled with tension. Prove it. You say you have nothing to hide. Let's see why you're determined to keep me out of your cellar. My mouth opened and closed in protest. How had he how had our conversation shifted so quickly? Why had I baited him? His belief didn't matter. He wasn't the only one in the kingdom who found supernatural abilities to be a waste of time. Over the years, people relied on magic less and less. Yet his indifference hurt. Yeah. It's mostly cobwebs and broken furniture. Open it, or my men conduct their search. I swallowed my denial and lifted the hatch. Derrick had a lantern and disappeared down the steps, leaving me to hover on the landing, biting my thumbnail and praying he wouldn't look too close. See? No deadlocks. My joke fell flat. In the cellar, Derrick bumped into a cabinet and muffled an oath. I chalked that one up to a win and moved down 2 steps. The light from the lantern illuminated the shelving unit along the wall, and I held my breath as he rifled through the drawers. Please don't. He found them. Excuse me. He found them. Vials clinked together as he removed a small box from the bottom drawer. The one with the skull and the crossbones burned into the wood. They needed to stop doing that. It was a dead giveaway. Those aren't mine. They were in with other orders, and I was storing them until they could be properly disposed of. Yeah, that sounded believable. Either way, you're coming with me. He slipped the narrow box into the coat and climbed the steps. You can pay the fines for these at the agency. Fines? Be reasonable. I am. You're lucky I'm not having you arrested. I curled my fingers into fists, afraid I might go full witch and turn him into a toad. He'd make a good toad. He had a personality for it. Not realizing how close he'd come to living the amphibian life, Derrick walked towards the entrance. I'll be in touch if I have any further questions. Don't leave the kingdom until we've cleared you for travel. I nodded, still steaming from the interrogation. Sylvia was right. He was handsome, but she'd forgotten to add cold and calculating to her description. Loathing all of loathing all loather of all things magic. Good prospect indeed. I'd rather eat poisoned mushrooms than become his wife. Must remember to cast a blessing spell on whoever that wretched soul turned out to be. She'd need it. He pulled open the door, and the little bell jingled. How could something so cheery accompany his exit? A gong or a crackle of thunder would have been more appropriate. Left alone, I sank into my chair and retrieved Ella's ring. Exhaustion hung like a weight around my neck. I squeezed my fist, feeling the metal warm against my skin. That poor girl. It wasn't enough to die. She had to have Detective Arrogant assigned to her case, too. At least he hadn't discovered my connection to Argus. But now I had missed payment. I had a missed payment and a fine to pay. As wrong as it felt, so soon after Ella's murder, I had to pawn the ring. Sorry, Ella, I whispered, wherever you are. I shivered and rubbed my arms. In the moments since Derrick's departure, an icy chill had filled the shop. Frost crystallized on the windows, and my breath fogged around my lips. How strange! I moved to the window, apprehension slowing my steps. The frost was on the inside. Pressing my fingers against the glass, I left a warm print in the ice and squinted. There was something else there. Faint letters, as if someone had written them before the ice formed. As quickly as it appeared, the chill faded and the frost melted, but not before I made out the words, speaking them out loud, like they came from one of the spells. I couldn't deny that two words held certain power all on their own. Help me. And we'll end it there for now. Thanks again. We'll see you tomorrow. Bye.